Welcome back to Helen Cullen Productions. I'm Joel Cullen, and today I'm making sort of a different video today to talk about the worst games that I've ever played. So a few months back, I made this one video about the worst movies I've ever seen. So I'm doing something similar to that. The first game that I consider to be one of the worst I've played, which actually it's more like an honorable mention more than anything. And it's the game Nightmare Creatures for the N64. This game was actually one of the more fun games that I've played for the N64. Like, it looked really great. I really enjoyed that they tried to do like a horror survival video game for the N64, because there's not a lot that I've seen that they've tried to do that with that console, given that Nintendo was always like about family and all that. But the reason why the game made it to the video was because of the controls, really. And that just goes for N64 games in general. Like, the controls sucked, but for Nightmare Creatures, it really sucked. Especially during the final boss fight with Victor Crowley. Like, maybe this is because I grew up on like video games from the Xbox onward, but I'm kind of more used to the camera like locking onto a target when you're fighting them, so that way the controls don't get all janky. But when I was fighting Victor Crowley on top of the cathedral or whatever it was, there were too many times where I was just turning around completely the other way and hitting nothing but air, and then I'd have to like manually turn myself all the way around to even look at Victor Crowley. But by then he would already like jump behind me and hit me. And there were a few times where the controls were so out of whack, I would end up accidentally jumping to my death. That was my worst game I've played from the old retro era, which still wasn't even that bad. The more modern video game that I've played that's the worst in my opinion is Kane and Lynch 2: Dog Days. This one was incredibly boring. It did have a few good things about it. Like, it was one of the first games I've played where like you can actually interact with the environment, like kicking down doors or like using people as human shields. The gameplay was okay. There was that whole thing about like a shaky cam, and I'm not sure if that was supposed to be like a body camera or anything. I would have forgiven it if the game was like shot in like first person. But the fact that it took place in third person, I just found the whole thing weird. Luckily, there was an option to shut off that effect. Then there was the fact that there was also those glitched out effects whenever you get shot or hit, where your screen just goes like completely red or black. Where, unlike in the Call of Duty series where you can still see what you're doing, in Kane and Lynch, you can't really see what you're doing. So you're kind of running blind until you die, or you miraculously get to safety. And then the final thing that I didn't really like was the entire game was an eyesore. I'm more used to video games where like the colors are kind of like popped out and bright. Like, even for games on the N64, the colors were really saturated and bright and everything. But for Kane and Lynch, like, they were incredibly muted and desaturated to the point where the game just looked ugly to me. But that's just my opinion on what my worst games are, and they still weren't even that bad. I could still find some level of enjoyment out of them. So, what are your guys' thoughts on all this? And what are your worst games that you've ever played?